Well, friends, we're finally starting a new season of videos together, where all the secrets we've created together will finally be revealed. Finally, we'll find the answers to them, and all of this will have wonderful sound, which will be recorded with a microphone. Here's the microphone. It's an imported microphone, Yugoslavian, maybe even Czechoslovakian. So let's begin with the change in the position of bodies, which happens step by step. It's connected to the fact that it's the balance that's lost. The position of the body in space itself changes. A person begins to lose balance, and in this position, when he loses his balance, all his movements, all his efforts, they are aimed not only at, for example, raising a hand, lifting a leg, or picking up an object, but also at not losing balance at that moment, not falling, because his initial position from which he starts the movement is already uncomfortable. It's such that the muscles have to constantly work, constantly be tense to hold this pose, so the person doesn't fall. And here there are 3 stages that happen one after another. How the position of the body changes. Most often, well, almost always, it's exactly in the front to back direction, because loss of balance happens in several planes at once. This is the one where it all happens first and foremost. Most often, the lower part of the abdomen stops working first. Svi at the same time. The position of the pelvis changes in such a way that it rotates a lot. Right now we're analyzing the body's position itself. When a person isn't moving yet, they're just standing still, haven't started moving yet. And the first position is when the lower part of the abdomen isn't working and the pelvis has started to shift a little. Like this, forward, excessively. And here, when this part of the abdomen has lost its function, right here, this part of the back starts to tense up excessively. As a rule, this position isn't constant, and it often appears while stepping or during movement. That is, when a person walks, this muscle here starts to weaken, and the lower part of the abdomen stops holding the pelvis in place, and with every step they start to lean forward a little bit, just like this. At the same time, the leg starts to get overloaded, because we don't always pay attention to what happens to the leg that's left behind when we take a step. And when you take a step, you've moved your leg forward right here, like this. After that, it has to end up here in front somehow for the next step. To do that, it has to lift up. And this is the movement it has to make to change its position from the back to the front. And that's when this excessive tension in the lower back appeared. At this part of the step, when the leg stays here, right here, it starts to lift up so it can move forward, because it can't move any other way. It has to lift off the floor right here. If it doesn't lift off the floor here, it will be impossible to move it. And if this part of the back is already tense, then it starts to get overloaded here, taking on even more strain. This happens because the muscles in the legs have stopped performing the function of lifting the leg from the back here. And that function has shifted to this one. Very often, even in a healthy person, this can happen during long walks. When they get tired, the abdominal muscles start to get tired. Here, the iliopsoas muscle starts to get tired, and the lower back here starts to get overloaded. All this happens for a while, If nothing is done about it, then the second stage begins. This position becomes habitual and it starts to look like this. Here, not only does the lower back stop working and become overloaded, but the upper back does too, because by now the entire abdomen is no longer involved in movement. Very often, when people start doing the wrong exercises at this stage, they actually speed all of this up. Here, in this position, the pelvis already takes on this tilt constantly. So it becomes habitual for it. So here it can still change, meaning during movement it goes back and forth like this, E. But here it's already in this position from the start. If we take its two extreme positions while standing, that is this position and this position. Ideally, it should be in the middle between these two extreme positions, but here it's very close to this edge. And while moving, because the hind leg, the one that stays behind, its work doesn't improve either. When the position changes, the load increases even more. This is wrong, but at the same time, notice the difference. Yes, how else? In the third case, the position of the thoracic spine changed. This is the rib cage, and notice that here. The position of the rib cage itself hasn't changed yet. The rib cage is more or less where it should be. How can you speed up the transition from this stage to this one? Start actively working out the back extensors and begin training the muscles between the shoulder blades, which are the rhomboid muscles. If at this stage, without strengthening the abs, and most importantly, without engaging them in the movement in any way, you start training only the back in isolation, then you'll move to this stage faster. And in this case, not only does the stomach start to stick out forward, but the chest also begins to protrude forward.
What does forward mean? Yes, forward. Relative to what? You need to understand. Relative to what the displacement is happening. Relative to what? That is, relative to what all of this is sticking out forward. And relative to what? That's the question. Yes, try to answer. And now,
in this case, but here there will be back pain. Here there will be everything related, like the piriformis syndrome, all of that. There will be tension along the back of the leg, problems with bending forward, reduced mobility in the lower back itself, problems with turning, and a limited range of motion when turning, because this part will no longer be involved in the rotation. The thoracic spine will begin to over-rotate, causing the person to feel blocked whenever they try to turn. He feels like something needs to crack there, and then it won't interfere with his ability to turn. Such people like to make a sudden movement, to turn sharply so that something cracks, and this gives them relief for a while. There's still some rotation left here, but at this stage it's gone. So the spine in this position loses its ability to rotate relative to the pelvis. Here it still can, but only the thoracic region. Here it's almost completely preserved. The abdomen is weak, the back hurts, the pain radiates down the legs, it's hard to bend over, and you always want to stretch the muscles on the back side. People really like to do exercises and stretch right here, because they feel that mobility has been lost here. But why is it tight here? Because, for example, a muscle has a certain length, the length of the leg, the length of the muscles. Let's say the length of the muscle. Let's just keep it as is. So for this person, how many centimeters is it here? How many there? 15, right? 15 centimeters is the total muscle length. And this here, the total length of the fascia that covers these muscles. Here, the amount then they can stretch to hasn't changed. Here it's also 15. That's the maximum they can stretch to. But this distance, it's the places where all the muscles start and where they end. They became farther apart from each other, and here they are already in an extreme position relative to each other, and 15 is already not enough and you want to make them longer. But you can't make them longer. 15 is the maximum that can be. That's why you shouldn't stretch here, but rather move the pelvis back, back, turn it this way, so that during the bend it can also stay more or less in place, and it has some room to move forward. In this case, the spine seems to take a straight position, but it takes this position not where it should. It should take it here, but it's too far forward. So basically what happened is a change in the position of the spine in space relative to the pelvis. So it's here, but in the end, here it is at this stage, still right here, yes? And here, in the third case, it ended up right here. And here, the person is constantly leaning forward. In order to look ahead, instead of at the floor, they have to straighten up, not just in the lower back, but the entire spine overextends. Back is constantly tired, and there's constant fatigue between the shoulder blades. For some reason, they all love to do exercises that bring the shoulder blades together even more. In this case, they try even harder not to fall forward, technically, and to straighten up even more. But unfortunately, this actually makes them lean forward even more. In this case, the head, with this position of the spine, it actually ends up right here, yes? In this position it ended up, here it's too far forward, it starts to fall forward. And that's why they start pulling it back here, like this, like that. And this is one of the reasons, besides excess weight, for the appearance of a double chin, because the distance here decreases. That is, when you start pulling all of this back here, the distance between the edge of the jaw and the neck decreases. From the front surface, everything that is on the lower part, right here in the oral cavity, all of this starts to sag down, sag and sag. In the same way, everything here also sags. In the throat, the vocal cords, and the voice changes with age. It becomes kind of flabby, not as resonant as before. It gets dull and a bit flabby. Since everything has sagged, things now vibrate differently. A double chin can be treated not only by fasting, but also by changing the position of your body in space. Here are 3 stages, and at each of these stages you need to do certain exercises. And first of all, you need to determine where you are. Here, here, or here. To start the diagnosis and determine which stage you are at, you need to do it this way.